And today, so first of all, thank you, everyone. I know that this is unusual circumstances that we're operating through. I know as nonprofit leaders and professionals, we're probably home and we're probably separated and we're probably wondering, what are we doing now? On Friday, we had a great conversation with Dr. Renee Rubin Ross, who shared with us how to kind of come out of that emotional state that we were in. She made some good points about it being a time for grieving and a time for uncertainty. But in the end, we realized that once we acknowledged that, then we had cleared the path to go forward. So today we have Tom Brush. He's a nonprofit consultant coach who partners with nonprofit leaders and organizations, designing strategies to expand engagement with your constituencies, effectively manage volunteer and boards, increase donations from individuals, corporations, and foundations, and creatively steward donors. He's spent 25 years working in development. He knows what drives engagement and increases giving. Today, it's a great follow-up to Fridays because he's going to lead us through a discussion about entitled Ignite Action Now, how to get out of this state of inertia that we are all in. And Tom and I were talking before we went live quickly, and last week was tough for me and my team at Harvest. We just felt kind of like stuck, like, I don't know what to do next. And after reading some of Tom's notes over the weekend, I felt inspired and empowered. And I think this morning we kicked it off on the right foot. So welcome, Tom. First of all, how are you doing down in Maryland?
I'm doing really well. Thank you very much. It's great to be with you today and great to be with everybody who's watching.
Good. Excellent. Well, we love having you here. I know that you are very familiar with remote working, and for some of us, I think that this is certainly a new experience. But I'm so happy that you're here to share your insight into how we can get beyond this. I know you want to share your screen as well at some point, but I want to give you a second just to get us started.
Sure. Well, thank you very much, Sandra. It's great to be here. I think it has been an interesting time, and I think that there are things going on, although I just like to say it's life. You know what? Life is, we had challenges in our lives before this point. We have challenges in our lives today. And even once we get through whatever the new normal becomes, we're always going to have challenges. And I think as stress comes on us and worry and concern and frustration, we get stuck. I don't know how many times sometimes I'm trying to do something and I just find myself staring at my computer like, I don't know what to do. A couple of years ago, yeah, right, it happens to all of us. Or we look at our to-do list and at the end of the day, we've added more things than we've crossed off. And that to me only leads to more frustration because we go home feeling like, or today we get up from wherever our home office is or home space is and walk to another part of our house and say, man, I just don't feel like I got anything done.
Yeah. Tom, do you think that's heightened because of the situation that we're all living in now?
Yes, because I think there are more negative influences or negative impacts that we're feeling. But honestly, I think that for some people, the feeling is just as bad today as it was a month ago. Again, and in the nonprofit space where we don't always have the resources we have, whether that be financial resources, people resources, time resources. I know a lot of nonprofit leaders who go home every night and they probably were the first one to show up in their office. They were likely the last one to leave. And then they get home and feel like they need to do more work. And it's just an awful cycle that we get in because there's so much to do and our resources are limited. So yes, I think more people are feeling it now because there is so much, at least in the past, we were going to jobs. We knew we were going to get paid. We knew that things were just progressing and then we had other distractions. I think the biggest challenge now, there are less distractions. Yes. We're not taking our kids to events. Yeah. We're not going off to school. So now it's just like 24/7. All we hear is, what everybody is sharing. And that's why I have chosen to try to be as happy and upbeat as I can. And I'm not watching the news. I know that my community is going to let me know when I need to stay home They're going to let me know when things are going to return.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to avoid just the constant information that's beating us down and making us even more and more worried and anxious.
That's good advice.
Yeah, it's hard, but I also know I have a college senior who lost her senior spring, so she's devastated. My wife is an anxious person anyways, and so I sort of feel like, for me, to help me avoid that, I'm choosing to be as happy and as positive as I can be, knowing that there are other people out there who desperately need it.
We all need to surround ourselves with more of Toms.
Well, there's a lot of us out there, so yes, but I think we have a choice every day when we get up. Can we choose that we're going to let the world beat us, or are we going to choose that, you know what, we're going to take it on and we are going to move forward? And, you know, which is why I think this topic is so important, not only now, but all the time, is sometimes all we need to do is just take some action. Yes. What is that first step that we can take to just get us from being stuck, feeling paralyzed, feeling overwhelmed? And then once we take action, even if it's not right, it at least is moving us, and we can then determine at that point, we can measure that action and say, yeah, this is great, or now I need to pivot a little bit, or you know what? And I've said this to myself, that was the dumbest idea ever. I need to do a whole 360 and refigure it out. But at least we're not just stuck there doing nothing.
That's true. Is the risk heightened though? Because quite often I found with nonprofits that we work with, Tom, they're a little risk averse to begin with. So taking that kind of entrepreneurial approach is scary to begin with. Is that risk even heightened more now, given the uncertainty of the times?
It definitely is heightened. I think we can reduce the risk when we actually think through and work through what we want to do and why we want to do it. You know, if we had all day, I love to talk with organizations about, look at what you're currently doing and what have the results been. And now once we do that, now maybe we need some more information or we need to relook at something different, but given that, what are the opportunities that are in front of us?
Yeah.
And then how do we move forward? And I think that's part of the challenge. Is risk is, people are averse to risk because they worried about the outcome. Yes. I like to think, if I know and I have good information and data to help me figure out what I think is going to lead to the best success, I'm a lot more comfortable in taking risk. But you're right. I mean, I think people are always worried about how is everybody else going to view what we're doing. Yeah. You know, I know, and I've been in enough Facebook groups and talked to enough, their nonprofits are worried about fundraising. Should we be reaching out now? Should we pull back? What should we be doing? You know, and I think that is a real concern, because without those resources, they can't move forward. Yeah. But I think that if we make calculated decisions, always thinking about the people we're talking to and what is the perspective they might have, and with empathy, I think that we can still move forward and do things. Again, it's different, but if we're not moving forward, when whatever it is shakes out, we're going to be way behind. And I think that's going to be even worse.
So there is this feeling, and we touched on this briefly too, there is this feeling out there that the economy and our work is just kind of being held back by this event. And as soon as it clears up, everything's just going to spring forward. I think what your point is that we're going to work through today is how to break out of this holding pattern now in order maybe to be ready when that happens.
Absolutely. Because if we just go shelter ourselves and hide, yeah, we can't predict when we're going to be back. Is it going to be 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 3 months, 6 months? Nobody has that magic ball. And so we need to be prepared that it could be tomorrow. That somebody might say, hey, we've got a vaccine that's now working, and next week things are going to go back to the way they were. I don't think that's happening, but we need to be prepared for it. So even if the action that somebody is taking is just about being ready for whenever people say, okay, the light switches back on and now we can re-engage and stop practicing physical distancing, you know, that we'll be able to and ready for it. Because if we're not, it's going to move so fast, I think, once it happens, that you're going to miss out on opportunities that are going to be in front of you. And that's why I think that if you're constantly moving forward, you're going to be with your constituencies. They're going to know what's going on with you. They're going to be prepared. You're going to be prepared. And that's when you're prepared, that's when opportunity meets preparedness, is when you have good results.
So how do we get there? Are there steps we take? What's the first thing we do? I mean, a lot of times breaking out of inertia is just knowing the first step, and maybe it's not the right one, but it's something. How, Tom, do we as nonprofit leaders do that?
So I think there's a couple ways, you know, and I was going to go through the PowerPoint, but I'm actually not, because I think this conversation is better.
Okay.
I think the first is writing them down and really acknowledging, you know, and I'm kind of old school. I remember back to the days in school when the way we learned to spell was we wrote everything out. Just keep writing it 10 times through. So I think there's something about when you put it down on paper, it becomes live, and it becomes more important. And the other thing I feel like is, because of all the challenges that we all have, you know, and as we're going through this, I'd encourage people to think about what's a challenge that they're currently dealing with, and they might be able to walk through these steps to figure it out. So I think I'm a firm believer that if you have something in front of you that's really important, you can probably only do 1 or 2 of those things a day, because it's going to take time and focus and energy. And I think where we are now, with people working from home and the distractions that are there and some of the challenges of that, we're probably down to one thing. So it's identifying what is that one big thing that's going to move your organization forward or move you forward that you're going to try and accomplish today. And because we're already halfway through the day, I think this is a good practice for people for tomorrow. And I think the other thing is, too often we try to do those really big challenging things at a time when we're not most productive. So what I recommend is identifying when is that time of day that you're most productive, or in the situation we're in now, when is that time of day when you can get peace and quiet, when you can find internet access, when your kids are busy doing something else, or you don't have a meeting scheduled. Block that time out and say, this is my time to be productive on the one big thing. And it's going to be different for everybody. I love, like, 7 o'clock to 9, I can bang out a whole bunch of information. If I need to really do creative stuff, that's when I do it.
In the morning, 7 to 9 in the morning?
7 to 9 in the morning. Yep, I get up early and my mind is clear, and I have my little prepared drink, and I'm good to go. That's good. Then, because I know later in the day, I'm not as focused. It means I'm not going to probably be as effective. It's going to take me longer to accomplish it. And so I think that's critical, is figuring out when is your most effective time of the day. And I would say, if you can, block that out every day. So this can even work once we're back to working in an office space. You know, I tell people, just put I'm on a conference call, or block it out and say I have a personal meeting with myself. Because otherwise we let that time get taken by somebody else. And so now if we're spending it sitting in a meeting, you know, that's probably not going to work. So it's picking the one thing you're going to do and identifying the exact time that you're going to do it. Those, I think, are the first 2 steps. The other thing, go ahead. I was just going to say, the other thing about it is understanding what the end is going to look like. Because I'm a big visualization person. And so I like to write down, like, what does success look like? So when I get through with this project, what is that going to be? So if I'm trying to write a fundraising plan, you know, my goal is to say, I'm going to have my plan set for the next 6 months. And I know what I think the results are going to be at the end of that. So now we can start to almost work backwards, and while we're moving forward, to figuring out what each step is. But I like to know what success is like, because then we can imagine it. We can feel like, what is it going to be like once we get there? And I think that's a really powerful thing for our minds to go through.
So a couple of questions. When people are choosing that one thing to do, a couple of things come up. One, how do you fit into the current climate? So I think what that means is, how do you make sure that you're not looking like a purple alligator, you know, on the Sahara, because there's a lot of noise about what's happening. So I guess relevancy, that's one. And then the second question around that is, how do you know what the right thing to do is? And does that matter?
Yeah, I'll take the second one first, and then maybe, I hope that makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't know that I don't know that there is a right thing. The right thing might be based on a deadline that you have. It
Mm-hmm.
might be based on all the other things that you might look at. So I like to categorize things in my to-do lists as those things that are helping me achieve goals, that are moving me or the organization forward to achieve whatever goals I have. And if you don't have or weren't given annual goals, now would be a really good time to sit down and write out what do I want to achieve? And that you can go into a whole nother topic about setting goals.
Yes.
But I think it's important to know where we're going to be and how we're going to measure it. So
Mm-hmm.
to me, a lot of times that drives it. So I know when I was last year, I did a really good job of measuring my goals. And so every month when I looked at that, I could say, well, I'm doing really well on goal 1, but I'm struggling with goal 2. I'm not as far ahead as I wanted, you know? So if it's maybe reaching out to contacts, you know, I've done all my email solicitation, or I've got my volunteers all lined up, but I need to recruit more people or talk to more people.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a way to help you figure out what are the most important next steps, is by knowing where you are in terms of relation to progress to goals. So if you look at that list, you can say, okay, if I might be able to do one big thing each day for the next 5 days, what are those 5 things going to be? Here's the time frame I'm going to do them. And then I think if you accomplish them and they're helping you move towards your goals, it can't be right or wrong.
Mm-hmm.
It's helping you make progress.
Mm-hmm.
Make sense?
Oh, total sense. You know, even just accomplishing that first thing has got to do an awful lot for your psychological perspective of being productive.
And if you think about it, if you go back to that thinking about your to-do list, if you are crossing things off of a list that's really important, that's helping you reach your goals,
Yeah.
how different are you going to feel at the end of the day? Yeah, maybe you didn't answer this email, or you didn't call this person back and schedule this meeting. But those things are kind of things we have to do. And they're important, but we don't have to do them immediately.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the other thing I recommend to people is turn off all your notifications, or at least close your email.
Okay.
I end up being the person who an email, I'll see the pop-up and, oh, I got to respond to that. And I distract from something really important.
Oh, yeah.
Look at an email. And next thing I know, I've got 20 tabs open across my screen.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, where was I and what was I doing? And how do I get back on track and all of that nonsense? Yeah. So I think that's a helpful thing, is to clear away and get yourself really focused. Your relevancy question, I think, is going to be different for everybody. Okay. You know, there are organizations who are dealing with really challenged people or issues at this time. Mm-hmm. So for them, one message is really going to stand out. You know, so if you're dealing with seniors or people who are shut-ins or don't have homes, or your message can be very outright, is we're on the front lines, we're making a difference. Mm-hmm. If you're dealing with something that is still critically important, maybe you're helping families with cancer, kids who have cancer, and you're trying to help them with it, that's still really important. Mm-hmm. It's just how do you create a message that is understanding of why your group that you're supporting, your mission, is still vital in a time when there's a lot of vital things going on. Yeah. And what I think is important is, if we're talking to our people, they already know that. You know, no matter what, if you're an art museum, they firmly believe that the arts are critically important. And so they are going to understand that if you're that you need resources just to keep going, to keep people hired, so that when things come back to whatever the new normal is, you're still standing. And that something that they care deeply about is still involved. And so, you know, these organizations wouldn't exist if they didn't add value and they weren't critically important and relevant to the world. It's just, how do you show empathy in your message that maybe the large gift you were going to make to the art museum, okay, maybe a little bit less of that you're going to make because somebody really wants to help an organization that's delivering food to shut-in seniors.
Mm-hmm.
or,
Mm-hmm.
or supporting the hospitals in what they're trying to achieve.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because I think if we're relevant, we're always relevant. It's just the level of relevancy and how we share that message with our people.
Sure. And that makes a lot of sense. We've been fielding a lot of calls from clients that we work with that are on capital campaigns. And, they are certainly not going to move forward with that in this time. Some of them are actually waiting until the fall or even the end of the year to pick that back up. But in conversations with them and with colleagues, we've realized this time, this pandemic, what we're living through affects everyone. So we had a hard time finding a nonprofit that wouldn't have something to lend to be relevant here, to support this. Whether it's an art organization that can, create a 5-minute meditation of all the beautiful artwork that we have and just have people come onto your website to view that, to bring down that energy, right?
Yeah.
So, just finding something that can help. We're using the term stand in the gap, which, we didn't make up. It's a common term, but that's really what we see, that as you're saying, if you were relevant, you still are relevant. It's just in what way? What is it that you're going to do?
And I'm actually going to be the one, I'm going to challenge you to think about this a little bit in your organizations. Is I think that if we really believe that in our industry, fundraising is about approaching the right people at the right time with the right project, then there may be people out there who it is absolutely appropriate to talk to about a capital campaign gift at this time. I think that if we're doing our jobs the right way, we know our top donors, we know them really well. And we know kind of what their situation might be like. And for some, and as much as I hate to say it, if you have a big donor who's in a grocery store, who owns a large group of grocery stores, they're doing really well now. They're selling stuff like crazy.
Yes,
yeah. And not that I'm telling anybody go target those people. But if you already have a really strong relationship with someone like that, and they're looking for, how can I give back for all that I have been given in this time, that, it just so happens everybody needs what we have right now. I think that it's appropriate to approach them. You have to be sensitive, and you got to have empathy, and you got to know that they could be not focused on it, but that doesn't mean you can't reach out and ask them how they're doing. Because I find if you reach out and talk to them, what's the thing they're going to ask you? If they truly care about your organization, they're going to say, how are you doing? How can I help?
Yes. Yes.
And so I think we have to be careful and cautious. But as you said, if they were relevant before, we all have relevancy and we all have a role we can play in this. Talking to your best donors about that, I still think is okay.
A question about leadership. So a lot of times we are approached outside of the type of environment we're working in, with nonprofit leaders who want to know how they can inspire and motivate and move their team forward. In this time, how do we take this concept of breaking out of inertia? I understand how I can do it for myself. How do I apply that? What are the things I have to think about and do with my team to get them moving forward too, because they need it?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. One is making sure that they have, if they're able to come up with, here are the things I want to accomplish today. Like that might be a thing I would do with everybody. Say, okay, and appreciate that they may not be able to work the typical 9 to 5.
Yes.
They might have to work really early, or they might have to work late at night when they, when they're done taking care of their senior parents or whatever. And so I think it's having that understanding that the workplace is different too. But if you still can ask them, what do you hope to accomplish today? And keep them accountable. Without being like the heavy hammer that says, what do you mean you didn't get this done? Because there could be a million things and reasons why. Yes. So having that, I think empathy is such a key word now, understanding. But there's no reason that you still can't ask them to set daily goals and to keep them accountable for those goals. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things I love with anybody who's setting goals, I love to ask them, how are they going to celebrate completing that goal?
Oh, that's a great question. That's a
Because
wonderful question.
I firmly believe that we get beat up. Again, all these things are beating on us. And especially if we're like, oh, I'm struggling to get all this, I've got all these things to do, but if I just get this one thing done, and it can be small, tiny things. You know, I know people who will put on their favorite song and dance a little bit, or they'll go sit in the corner with their cat or dog and just relax. But I think we need to figure out, how do we celebrate when we achieve something that is meaningful and important to us?
Hmm. One final question on all of this. How do we communicate outwards to our donors, to our board, to our constituents, to our partners, that we are moving, that we are iterating, that we are ignited and we're acting? How do we get that message out there?
Sure.
Or is it important?
I think it's critical. I think, one, I think that we want to maintain our relevancy with them throughout this. Two, we want to educate them and make sure they're aware of what's going on. I'm a big believer in transparency. If you tell them where you are, what you're doing, and what you need, and that's part of your message all the time, they're just going to expect this is what it's going to be. And they're going to be more educated and aware so they can share that with somebody else. You know, I think so many times we want to hide, oh, we're struggling a little bit and we don't know what to do and the budget's tight and I might have to release people. And some of it you can't share. But I think you can share generally, here's how the organization is going. And I think if you're open and honest, and if you say, you know what, we just got a huge grant that is going to keep us pretty sustained for the rest of the year. If you share that with your people and you say, I know there are a lot of really good causes that you could support. We hope that you will still support us, but we completely understand if you have another charity you want to give to. We are okay.
That's a game changer.
We're going to need you to stay involved, but we understand that there is a lot going on. And we're actually looking, how can we help those who are desperate with where they're at? I just feel like so often we try to hide information, worrying that that's going to give a negative impact or the wrong feeling about what we're doing. Just a quick story, if I can. I know we're running.
Yeah. No, that's okay. We got time.
I had an organization who was afraid, who asked me because they received a grant. It was a really good grant for them. They're small and it was a nice size grant. And they were getting a lot of publicity for it. And the executive director was concerned because they felt like, well, you know, we got this grant. Maybe now other people aren't going to support us because they think we don't need it. And what I shared with them was, if you keep sharing your impact, the more impact you have, the more people want to support an organization that's going to continue to have impact.
That is true.
And I think that's the same, that just be open and honest, that this is what's going on. Yeah, we got this grant. Here's how we're using it. And you know what? If we had more resources like that, we could even do even more. And I think that transparency is so important for nonprofits, to just let the people who are closest to them be even closer. Because as they get even closer, what are they going to want to do? They're going to want to be more engaged. They're going to be more connected, which means likely they might provide more resources because it's such a part of their lives. I think when we hold things back, you know, people feel a little bit of distance. They don't know what's going on, and they start to wonder, well, what's happening over there? So I just feel like if we're transparent and open and honest as we can, that people appreciate that.
I love this. Anything else that you want to share with the nonprofits that will be seeing this or calling on you or calling on me to help them through this further?
Yeah, I talked a little bit about this. I'm doing these Facebook Lives just to kind of keep myself sane, but it's find the communities that you are connected to and lean into them. Whether you want to lean into them because you need help, or you want to lean into them because you can help. I think that more than ever now, we need that engagement. You know, people are using the word social distancing, and a friend of mine coined this, and so I'm trying to stay with, I think we're practicing social engagement while we're physically distancing. I
True.
think more than ever, we need to connect. And so I think if you're out there, don't hesitate to call a peer, to call somebody in your network from wherever, and either to ask for help or ask how they're doing. I think that more than ever, leaning into whatever community you have is important.
Absolutely. I think it was Mr. Rogers that said his mother always told him, look for the helpers. And my experience over the last week has been that there are a lot of helpers out there, both known and surprising. And I appreciate you, Tom, for coming on here and sharing this. I know we're going to continue to have some conversations. I think there's some good things that we can pull together for the nonprofit sector currently, as well in the future. And I believe that at the end of this, we're going to find this disruption has somewhat changed the nonprofit sector, but changed it in a very positive aspect for going forward. Appreciate the insight that you bring about getting unstuck now and being able to move forward so that we can be ready for that. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much. Thanks very much for putting this together. It's a great resource, you know, and again, the more we can provide for this world, the better off we're going to be. So thank you.
We're happy to do it. All right. We will see everybody tomorrow at noon. Thanks,
guys. Have a great rest of the day, everybody.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.